we can find in our spirits. Now, the first thing I want you to see about this man, he was in a self-conflict. That we notice a self-conflict. Here he is conflicted with self. Here he is in an environment where he has an internalized crisis. His crisis doesn't necessarily affect anyone else in the world, but it affects him. And you know what I found? Personal purpose, Al, sort of works like that. It may not affect you, but it burns me when I'm not being and doing what God has called me to be and do. You know, it just affects you. The other people around you, it may not affect them, but there's something inside of you, and you become infected, you become bothered, because you know you have a hope, you have a destiny, you have a calling to fulfill in the earth. And you find yourself in a conflict. And we find this individual whose purpose seems to be deferred, whose great vision for life seems to be silenced, whose hope seems to have laryngitis in his life. But we find this individual in a conflict because he has a human hurt. Go over there to verse 5 of 5. It says, one man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. Wow. 38 years of pain. 38 years of struggle. 38 years of conflict. What do? Now, fiction says, hey, if you want to get out of that predicament, the only thing you have to do is pray harder. I mean, I guess that helps, but that's a little bit of fiction. And some people say, well, if you want to get out of that predicament, just get up. If I could, I would. So that's downright foolishness. So one thing I want you to know is that God does things in his fulfillment of time. You can pray all you want, and you should. But he's going to do it in his fulfillment of time. The first thing I want you to understand, his fulfillment of time. And when we move in faith, it becomes our time clock begins to be set to God's time clock. And over there in England, we talk about Big Ben, and Big Ben is a clock tower, and everybody in London, England, sets their clock to Big Ben. And what we are called to do is to set our clocks of destiny to the clocks of God Almighty. And when we set our clocks to the clocks of God Almighty, it's just going to give you a perpetual peace over your life. See, God's going to do it. I had a guy, well-meaning. He came in, he said, preacher, do you believe in the word of God? I looked at him first, and I humbly said, yes. He said, well, all you got to do is speaking in God to fill this church up all night. I said, man, go over there and sit down somewhere. I mean, you know, I don't even want to respond to it. Go over there and sit down somewhere. That's what you do. And then another day he came in and had the same conversation. He told me about this big-time church he goes to in town. I said, do you know the history of that church? Do you know they started in a feed store in the 50s? Do you know they had a handful of people for about 30 years? Do you know for the first 3 years, the preacher wasn't even there. He was on a missionary trip trying to raise money for the church. Man, go over there and sit down somewhere. God's fulfillment of time. It happens on his watch, on his clock. And sometimes we struggle, we strain, we spend extra money. We do all we can because we wanted to put it in the microwave and get that popcorn out. Some of y'all remember when there was no microwave? You remember you had to take the popcorn, sometimes you had a little pan that they put it on. And you cut the stove on. Now, some of y'all older than me, you got to know. They didn't invent it in my time now, but you take that popcorn and you put it what? Put it on the stove. You know, people talk about Bluebell, and they happy Bluebell back, and I think it's a great ice cream as well. But do you know what I can remember growing up? I remember when my mama and them would make homemade ice cream. They get that rock salt. They had all kind of flavors now, peach, strawberry. They'd make that stuff, man. But now we want to go to Kroger and get the Bluebell, CVS, or H-E-B, and when they don't have Bluebell, we don't know what to do anymore. The same thing happens in the area of our faith, the area of believing for God to do something amazing and significant in our lives. It's in his fulfillment of time, and it is in his way. The other thing we see about this particular young man, not only did he have a human hurt. Now, two more things about this human hurt, and I'm going to move on. All right, Chris, the first thing about this human hurt, it was self-inflicted. He did wrong. He was guilty, my friend. Demetrius, he chose to run with the wrong crowd. And the wrong crowd produced devastating results in his life. He made a poor decision. They told him this was the right way, this was the wrong way. He chose to go the wrong way. Now, how do you know? Because when you speed forward to the end of the lesson, Jesus said when he found him in the temple, sin no more, or a worse thing might happen to you. But what does that mean? It was your own poor choices that resulted in this in your life. Now, when you have a human hurt and it's your fault, boy, that's some tough pain there. Have you ever been there, or is it just me again? You know, when you know it's your fault now, nobody did this to you. You did it to yourself. No one made you marry so-and-so. You did it. You said, I do. And now that I do, it ain't right no more. No one made you do it. You did it yourself. And sometimes we have consequences of, 500,000 people a year die from smoking cigarettes. I mean, what a company that can get 500,000 new customers every year. And you're losing 500,000 to cigarette smoking. That's pretty foolish in my opinion. But what happens when sometimes individuals get counseled? Man, they stop smoking before they leave the doctor's office. But what I'm saying is, what do you do when it's your fault? See, I've had some things happen to me in my life. My mama didn't do it. My sister didn't do it. My wife didn't do it. Society didn't do it. The man didn't do it. I did it. And what happens is when you find yourself in an I did it situation, a lot of times we lay there longer than what we should. We don't even want to get up anymore. You know why? The Bible says you reap what you, oh Lord. The Bible says what's done in the dark gonna come to the, so we find ourselves, hey, the light is on. Can't cut it off. We reap what we sow. Well, this is my harvest. And we stop talking to God. We stop asking God. We stop believing in the impossible because I did it. If we get a moment, I'll try to come back to that again as well. The other problem we see here is when it's societal. When there's a societal problem, and so we make an excuse sometimes because of society. I don't want to give you a history class on America, because we all can give that class. But there was certainly a time, it may still be, certainly a time in America's history when it was very, very ugly. And one group had it, and one human group was not even human. What an ugly time in history. And then when freedom came in our history of America, because it's everybody's history, there was a time when everybody was human, but this one had this rights and this one had this rights. There was a time when it was separate but equal, but they had new books, and you had books with no pages in it, but it was equal. And so when society does it, we understand that when we look at that there's over 1 million individuals incarcerated in our society. I mean, over 1 million individuals incarcerated in our society. But not only is there over 1 million individuals incarcerated in our society, it's the minority groups that are in there the most. So we understand that wrong is wrong and right is right at every aisle in the grocery store. But some people only follow certain young people down the aisle. So those young people keep getting called and these young people don't get called. So, but my point is, when it's a societal issue and there's a societal problem, we use it as an excuse to lay there. I don't have to get up because the man keeping me down. And God is saying, get up. You have an amazing future, an amazing destiny. You're going to be different. Society says something different, so we give in to the excuse. One of the greatest things with Barack Obama being president of the United States, whether you are on this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle, one of the greatest things is this is a president of a single mother. Not only is this a president of a single mother, the byproduct of a single mother, but this is also the byproduct of a multiracial group, which is ultimately going to be the predominant group in 25 years. And not only is it that, this is also someone who represents that culture group that was abused for hundreds of years in this country. And what it does, if we're really paying attention, it says the societal issues are not an excuse to lay there. You don't have to lay there 38 years. Maybe you could have got up in 33. Maybe you could have got up in 29, maybe 27, 17. I just want to tell somebody it's time for you to get up. Time to get up out of your circumstance. Time to get up out of your position. Hey, you don't have to be broke, busted, and disgusted. You can get up out of that circumstance and situation. Everybody in your family ends in divorce. Hey, that doesn't mean you have to end in divorce. You know, young people are having babies at an alarming rate and getting in trouble at an alarming rate. Hey, it don't have to be your baby. So we can believe in possibilities. So this man had a conflict in his life. He not only had a human hurt, he began to look for human help. Human hurt, I need human help. And I don't have long to deal with the human help. But one thing I find is that sometimes we have self-driven solutions. And just the Cliff Notes version of that one is always going to end disastrous. When we are driving the car, it's going to end disastrous. Sometimes I have a memory my mother knows nothing about. And I can remember in the neighborhood where I was raised, the street we lived on, it had a circle around it. So there's a road that comes in. My street is here to the right. If you come the other way, my street is here to the left. And then it goes maybe about 25 yards, and it starts to bend on both sides. And it bends hard, pretty hard bend. And then when you get to where these two sections come together, there's a street there that goes to my auntie's house that's here today. But I can remember being about 13, and one of my friends got the car, and we came out of that street my aunt lived on, and we made a right. And we made that right, now what's coming up? Boy, that bend coming up. And boy, he hit the gas, and we were like, yeah. And boy, he got in that bend. Cars parked on the street, cars coming. He went to screaming, we went to screaming. He closed his eyes. I don't know to this day how God got us through that. So when you drive the car, sometimes we hit that bend too hard. And it's disastrous results when it's self-driven solutions. He wanted human help. Humanity could not help him, and I have to move on. The next thing we see, not only do we find a man in a self-conflict, but we find him operating in this self-conflict in a social context. See, sometimes we get so holy we're no more earthly good. We're so holy and perfect and caught up in heaven, we forgot that we live in the earth. And the Lord probably going to let us stay here another 30, 40 years, so we might as well do something with our lives while we're here. I know you're going to heaven, and I know you're saved, and you're going to be with Jesus forever. But he's going to leave you here about 50 more years, so you might as well do something while you're here. And so he's hurting in a social context. I want you to see two things real quick. There was gates and columns, and there was a crowd. There were what? Verse 2. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate, or yours might say sheep market, in Arabic called Bethsaida, which has 5 roof colonnades. Now, a couple things here. We see gates and we see columns. Now, when you see this gate, in this time, cities, great cities, had walls around them. Just a different day, different time period. And what made a city great during this particular day and time, it was not like in our day if you have harbor there. That makes a great city. you have a tremendous airport that makes it a great city. Even in Houston, Texas, we have this great ship channel. What a powerful thing. But that's not what made you a powerful city back there in these days. What made you a powerful city was having a great wall. Has anybody ever heard of the Great Wall of China? So picture that in your mind. And so a great city had a tremendous wall that you could not get past. Well, how do you think you got into the city? You got into the city through these great gates. And when enemies would attack you, they would attack you through the gates. And so they would put watchtowers and buildings and all of these other things. They would put these things right there by the gates so that if someone tried to attack you, they could defend that particular gate. But the other thing that they would do in this gate, Thomas, it was kind of like the barber shop, Jermaine. You know how you in the barber shop cutting hair, and boy, y'all talking about all kinds of stuff. You know, I look forward to getting a haircut from Jermaine because I got to tell him about them Texans, boy. I mean, I'm ready. I'm not really going to get a haircut. I'm going to see his face when I tell him about them old sorry Texans, you know. Or about them Astros or the Rock. You know, anything Texas, boy, you're going to mess him up. You know, or mess with Thomas about the Cowboys and ask him why he liked the Cowboys. Or Tommy about OKC and how OKC and Kevin Durant is so great and how Seattle going to win the Super Bowl and they lost about 4 games already. You know, that kind of stuff. Not even about the haircut anymore. It's just about that kind of stuff. So the gate was where life took place. The gate was where it went down at. The gate was the main street. The gate was where everybody went. They could have a club at the gate. They could have a party at the gate. Guess where they would have legal matters discussed? At the gate. Well, what if you need some water? You know, bottled water. You didn't want to go get your own water. You go to the water gate. Well, what if you needed to buy some sheep? Go to the sheep gate. So the gate is where life took place. And here he is near a gate, hearing life take place, hearing people laugh, hearing people joke, and he's laying all by himself on this bed. So the gate in this context, social context. What context? In the social context, it reminds him of his failure. It reminds him of what didn't work out. And some of us, we can't get past what happened. What happened? Sometimes you talk to individuals and a horrible thing happened when they were a child. A horrible thing. They can't get past it. They were abused, they were hurt, and I get it. And they just can't get past it. Some of us have gone in business. I've had great success in business, but I sure failed a lot. But I've always been able to get past the failure. Pick my head up and move on. Some of us have had a car repo. Devastating thing. Get past it. Some of us have had to divorce. Get past it. Because the second one going to be the best one. And we can't get past what happened. So we want faith to operate in our lives, but we can't get past the noise at the gate. But if you can ignore that noise, tell that noise you are a liar. The second thing, and I'm moving swiftly, the column. The column in the what context? Social context represented barriers. Here you have these columns. I went to a wedding last weekend, and in the facility, it was a very nice facility, and in the facility, they had columns. You know, when you get married, you don't want to see columns. You know, columns are like a barrier. They're destructive. So what someone did, they covered the columns in lace, and they put a light of illumination in the column. And boy, the columns look bad. Now, you know, they look good, the columns in there. But oftentimes when you're coordinating, you're decorating, a big old beam. Can you imagine a big old beam right here holding the building up? It's kind of in the way a little bit. And so socially, this represents barriers that he has to overcome socially. There are barriers that you're going to have to overcome and I'm going to have to overcome. It may not be the barrier of sickness, but it might be. It may not be the barrier of bad credit, but it might be. It may not be the barrier of poor family relationships, but it might be. It might be the barrier of being born on the wrong side of the tracks in poverty, but it might not be.